Behind the cheerful facades and playful animal antics, what truly lurks when the gates close and the crowds depart? Welcome, curious soul, to Nightmare True Horror. Tonight we venture beyond the visitor paths into the shadowed corners of 7 zoos, where the boundary between observer and observed blurs into terror. What unsettling truths have you sensed behind the glass or the bars? Share your own chilling zoo encounters in the comments below. And if you dare to look closer, to uncover what lies beneath the surface, ensure you are subscribed. For sometimes, the most dangerous predators aren't the ones in the enclosures. Prepare yourselves. The final tour is about to begin, and the exhibits tonight are far from ordinary. Trust me, the last reveal is always the most fairer. And I'm a local blogger, the kind who covers the city council meetings nobody else wants to. The slow decline of Main Street businesses, the human stories behind the headlines. So, when the Oak Valley Wildlife Park announced its permanent closure after 70-odd years, budget cuts, dwindling attendance, a few too many animal welfare complaints, I signed up for the final farewell tour. It felt like documenting the end of an era, a chance to capture some last poignant images of a place that had been a childhood staple for generations. I expected melancholy, maybe a touch of decay. I didn't expect the ice-cold dread that would settle in my bones. The park, on that last gray Saturday, already felt like a ghost of itself. The cheerful, brightly painted entrance sign was peeling, one of the wooden giraffes flanking it missing an ear. The usual cacophony, the roar of lions, the chatter of monkeys, the shrieks of children, was replaced by an unnerving, heavy silence. Most of the enclosures we passed on the guided tour were starkly empty. The straw bedding raked clean, the water troughs dry. All our beloved residents have been safely relocated to wonderful new homes and sanctuaries across the country, chirped Mrs. Albright, the zoo's longtime director, a woman whose smile seemed stretched a little too tight over her drawn face. Her cheerfulness, and that of the few remaining staff leading our small group, felt aggressive, forced. The first real discordant note was the smell. Near the reptile house, locked tight, a hastily printed under decontamination. No entry sign slapped on its doors. The usual earthy reptilian scent was overpowered by a sharp, sweet chemical odor, almost like formaldehyde, but with a cloying floral undertone. Just a thorough deep clean, folks. Mr. Henderson, the head zookeeper, boomed, his voice a little too loud, making sure everything is spick and span for the handover. He quickly steered us away. As we passed the vast empty lion enclosure, I noticed fresh, deep tire tracks in the muddy service road leading to a chained back gate. A gate only ever seen padlocked and overgrown. They looked like they belonged to a heavy commercial truck. Lots of equipment being moved out, of course, Mrs. Albright said, her eyes not quite meeting mine when I pointed them out. So much history to pack up. So much history to pack up. The tour felt rushed, curated, deliberately avoiding some of the older, more secluded sections of the zoo. The aviary, the nocturnal house, the old quarantine pens tucked away behind the veterinary clinic. It was near the clinic, another building marked with a biohazard protocol sign, that I saw them. 2 figures in what looked like disposable white coveralls and face masks, hurriedly carrying a long, heavy, plastic-wrapped bundle from a side door towards an unmarked white van parked discreetly behind a stand of overgrown bamboo. The bundle was oblong, roughly human-sized, though lumpy. They froze when they saw our tour group. Then, with a shared, panicked glance, practically threw it into the back of the van and sped off down the service road, tires spitting gravel. Donating some old taxidermy to the university, Mr. Henderson stammered, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple despite the cool air. It didn't look like any taxidermy I'd ever seen. The remaining animal enclosures we were shown were mostly for smaller, less exciting creatures, a few listless prairie dogs, some nervous-looking goats in the petting zoo. But even there, the atmosphere was wrong. The staff's smiles were brittle. Their answers to questions were vague, rehearsed. The farewell tour felt less like a nostalgic goodbye, and more like a carefully managed stage play, and we were the unwitting audience to a performance whose true script was hidden. Finding a sudden need for the restroom as the tour neared its end by the main gates, I slipped away. I had to know. That chemical smell, the tire tracks, the bundled taxidermy, the locked-down buildings showing signs of hurried recent activity, new padlocks on some, fresh mud tracked around the entrances of others, a faint, almost inaudible humming coming from within one of the old feed storage barns. My journalist instincts, long dormant under layers of city council minutes, were screaming. I circled back towards the veterinary clinic, keeping to the overgrown service paths. The unmarked van was gone. The clinic door was now secured with a heavy new chain and padlock, but a window high up and grimy was slightly ajar. I found a stack of old crates clambered up. The chemical smell was overpowering here, stinging my nostrils. I peered inside. The room was dimly lit by a bare bulb. It wasn't a sterile veterinary space anymore. It looked like a processing room. Stainless steel tables, hoses, large plastic barrels, some sealed, some open, emitting that sickly sweet odor. And on one table, a collection of tools that made my stomach churn. Heavy-duty bone saws, large knives, what looked like an industrial meat grinder, disassembled and partially cleaned. This wasn't about deep cleaning or donating old equipment. A sound from outside. Voices approaching. Mr. Henderson and one of the coverall-clad figures. I scrambled down from the crates, hard hammering, and ducked behind a row of overflowing dumpsters just as they rounded the corner. So the shipment needs to be prepped by tonight, Henderson was saying, his voice low, urgent. Abernathy's getting antsy. The buyers don't like delays. What about the unsalvageables? The other voice asked. Henderson sighed. Incinerator. Like always, less questions that way. The official story is relocated. The books are clean. Unsalvageables. Buyers. Incinerator. The horrifying truth crashed down on me. This wasn't just about closing a zoo. This was about liquidating assets. Perhaps illegally. Perhaps gruesomely. What couldn't be sold or relocated discreetly was being disposed of. The biohazard signs weren't for decontamination. They were to keep people out. The bundles weren't taxidermy. Before I could process further, before I could even think about what to do, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. I whirled around. Mrs. Albright, her cheerful mask was gone. Her face was a stony, unreadable landscape. Her eyes, like chips of ice. Lost your way, Mr. Davies? She asked. Her voice no longer chirpy, but flat, cold as the steel in her gaze. The tour ended. Some areas are not for public viewing. For the animal's final piece, you understand. The two men had heard her. They were approaching, their expressions grim. I was trapped. This wasn't just about animal welfare violations anymore. This was something far darker, far more organized. The secrets this zoo was taking with it were stained with blood and chemicals. There was no time for explanations, no chance for an escape through dialogue. I did the only thing I could. I shoved past Mrs. Albright. A desperate, unexpected move that caught her off guard. And I ran. I ran through the deserted pathways of Oak Valley. The empty enclosures like silent, accusing witnesses. I could hear them shouting behind me, their footsteps pounding on the asphalt. I knew the layout from childhood visits, a faint map in my panicked mind. I headed for a section of the perimeter fence near the old, disused bear pits. A place I remembered being weaker, more overgrown. I scrambled over, tearing my jacket, scraping my hands, but not stopping, not looking back until I reached the main road, gasping for breath, the acrid chemical smell still clinging to my clothes. I went to the state police, not the local precinct. I told them everything. The smells, the bundles, the locked buildings, the conversation I'd overheard, the look in Mrs. Albright's eyes. They listened. They investigated. When they finally gained access to Oak Valley Wildlife Park, it was mostly empty, eerily clean. The veterinary clinic scrubbed down. The suspicious service buildings cleared out. Mrs. Albright and Mr. Henderson expressed deep concern over my distress and wild accusations, suggesting the emotional toll of the zoo's closure had affected my judgment. No charges were ever filed due to lack of concrete evidence. The Oak Valley Wildlife Park closed its gates for the last time a week later. Its secrets, whatever they truly were, locked away. But I know what I saw, what I smelled, what I heard. The farewell tour wasn't a goodbye to the animals. It was a final, desperate act of concealment. And sometimes when I pass that silent, fenced-off property, I can almost hear the faint echoes of its last, terrible cargo, and the unnervingly cheerful voices of those who ensured it would never be found. The silence at Oak Ridge Zoo after closing isn't really silence at all. It's a living, breathing thing, heavy and watchful. During my first week on the night feeding shift, that silence followed me everywhere, pressing against my eardrums as I pushed my metal cart along the empty pathways. The wheels would squeak slightly against the concrete, the sound amplified in the darkness, making the lions stir in their enclosures. Sometimes, I'd catch their eyes reflecting the dim security lights, unblinking yellow orbs tracking my every move. I took the job because I needed the money. Simple as that. 3 months after my divorce finalized, the bills kept piling up while my bank account drained. When I saw the posting for night feeding technician at the local zoo, I figured it would be straightforward work. I'd always liked animals better than people anyway. That was before I understood what feeding time really meant at Oak Ridge. Howard, the senior zookeeper, showed me the ropes my first night. 50s, weather-beaten face, hands like sandpaper. He'd been at Oak Ridge for over 20 years and moved through the darkened zoo with the confidence of someone who owned the place. The animals reacted differently to him, alert, watchful, but never relaxed. I should have noticed that. Big cats get fed last, he explained, his voice a low rumble that matched the lion's distant growls. They're messy eaters. You don't want to be hosing down blood splatter at 4 in the morning. I nodded, trying to look competent, as I measured out portions of raw meat according to the feeding charts. The smell was overwhelming at first. That rich, metallic scent of fresh blood and flesh. Howard watched me with something like amusement in his eyes. You'll get used to it, he said, though I wasn't sure if he meant the smell or the job itself. The first strange thing I found was 3 days into my solo shifts. A scrap of bright blue fabric caught on the fence inside the tiger enclosure, small enough that it could have been anything. A piece of a maintenance worker's uniform, maybe, or something blown in from outside. I fished it out with the feeding tongs and tossed it in the trash without thinking much about it. 2 nights later, it was a single leather glove near where the female lion liked to rest. Not a work glove, but the kind you'd wear in winter. Nice leather, partially shredded. Again, I didn't think too much about it. Visitors drop things. Animals find them interesting. It happens. When I mentioned these finds to Howard during our shift changeover, he barely looked up from his coffee. They get creative with their toys, he said with a dismissive shrug. Sometimes they pull things in from outside the enclosure. Curious creatures. Don't worry about it. His explanation made sense, but something in his tone, too casual, too rehearsed, left a cold feeling in my stomach. Still, I was new. What did I know? A week later, I found a wristwatch half buried in the substrate of the leopard habitat. Stainless steel, face cracked, but still ticking. The band was stained with something dark that might have been mud. Might have been something else. That same morning, I overheard 2 maintenance workers talking about another disappearance near the park that borders the zoo property. The 3rd one this month. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed scrolling through local news reports on my phone. 3 people missing in the last month, all last seen within a mile of Oak Ridge Zoo. A college student walking home from a party. A jogger whose regular route took him past the zoo service entrance. A homeless man who sometimes slept in the park across the street. The next night, I started paying closer attention, looking more carefully at the enclosures during my rounds. That's when I found the sneaker. A child-sized red canvas shoe, half hidden under a rocky outcropping in the tiger habitat. The laces were still tied. When I picked it up with my tongs, something fell out of it onto the concrete. A small sock, balled up inside. My hands shook as I bagged the items. This wasn't something that had simply blown in or been dropped by a visitor. This was too specific, too personal, too wrong. Too wrong, I radioed Howard, who I knew was somewhere on the grounds doing security checks. Found something weird in the tiger enclosure, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. A kid's shoe, with a sock still inside. There was a long pause before his voice crackled back. Just bag it and leave it in the office. I'll take care of it. Shouldn't we report it? It could be connected to... I said I'll handle it. He cut me off, his voice shocked. Then, softer. Look, we get this kind of thing all the time. Kids throw stuff into the enclosures. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. But I was worried. The shoe was too far from any visitor viewing area to have been thrown. And it wasn't just the shoe. It was the pattern emerging. Personal items appearing in predator enclosures, while people disappeared outside. I decided to stay late after my shift ended at 6 a.m. I told Howard I wanted to catch up on some feeding logs, but really, I hid in the staff locker room until I was sure he'd left. Then I made my way to his office. The door was locked, but the window wasn't completely closed. I slid it open and climbed through, heart hammering in my chest. The office was cluttered, but organized in its own way. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A desk with an ancient computer occupied another. What caught my eye was a large map of the zoo and surrounding area pinned to the wall. Red pins marked locations throughout the neighborhood. I moved closer, squinting in the dim light coming through the window. Each pin had a date written next to it in tiny, precise handwriting. The dates corresponded with the disappearances I'd read about. A drawer in the desk was locked. The only locked drawer. I found a letter opener and worked at it until the cheap lock gave way. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a stack of plastic bags containing personal effects, watches, jewelry, ID cards, names I recognized from the missing persons reports, and photographs. Dozens of them. People entering the zoo through the service entrance late at night. Always with Howard. Always looking nervous or confused. The journal was worse. Detailed accounts of what Howard called feedings. Nameless dates. Descriptions of how the subjects performed when introduced to the enclosures. Notes on which animals were most efficient. Which ones played with their food. Which ones consumed everything, leaving no evidence. My stomach heaved. I barely made it to the trash can before vomiting. As I straightened up, wiping my mouth, I heard it. The distinctive sound of the service door opening, then closing. Footsteps in the hallway. Howard was back. Howard was back. I grabbed the journal and several of the evidence bags, shoving them into my backpack. Then I slipped back out the window, closing it behind me as quietly as possible. I crouched beneath the windowsill, not daring to breathe as Howard entered his office. Through the thin walls, I could hear him moving around, opening drawers, then a pause, a curse. "Damn it," he muttered. Then I heard him pick up a phone. "Yeah, it's me. We have a problem. The new night feeder's been snooping. No, I'm not sure how much he knows, but the journal's gone." A pause. "No, I'll handle it. Tomorrow night, we'll make it look like an accident." Feeding accidents happen all the time. My blood turned to ice. I needed to get out now. I crept away from the window, staying low until I reached the corner of the building, then ran to my car, parked in the staff lot. My hand shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove straight to the police station, the journal and evidence bags on the passenger seat beside me. The desk sergeant looked skeptical as I babbled my story. Disappearances, personal items in enclosures, Howard's journal detailing murder after murder. "Sir, these are serious accusations," he said, eyeing me like I might be unstable. "Do you have any proof?" I dumped the contents of my backpack onto his desk. The journal fell open to a page describing how the jogger specimen had tried to climb the enclosure fence before the tigers brought him down, how his running watch had been overlooked during cleanup. The evidence bag spilled out. A college ID card belonging to the missing student. The jogger's watch. A worn wallet with the homeless man's veteran's ID inside. The sergeant's expression changed from skeptical to grave. He picked up his phone. "Captain, you need to see this. Now." What followed was a blur. Statements, evidence cataloging, a raid on the zoo with search warrants. They found more than just Howard's trophies. In a disused storage building near the big cat night houses, They discovered a makeshift processing area. Freezers full of human remains, carefully portioned, feeding logs detailing which specimens went to which animals, and security camera footage, carefully archived, showing Howard and 3 other zoo employees bringing terrified people through the service entrance in the middle of the night. The investigation revealed Howard had been doing this for years. He started with homeless people, those less likely to be missed, then expanded to anyone vulnerable. Hikers, joggers, people walking alone at night. The other employees he'd corrupted were mostly young, impressionable. He'd convinced them it was for the good of the animals, that predators in captivity needed to express their natural hunting behaviors, that they were doing these lost souls a favor by giving their deaths meaning. Howard didn't resist arrest. When they let him pass me in handcuffs, he looked at me with something like pity in his eyes. "They need it, you know," he said quietly. "The cats. They need to remember what they are. What we all are. Underneath." He smiled slightly. Predator and prey. The oldest story there is. I quit the zoo the next day. Couldn't stand to walk those paths knowing what had happened there. The big cats were relocated to other facilities while investigations continued. Some of them had to be put down. Once they developed a taste for human flesh, they couldn't be trusted again. Sometimes I still dream about those eyes watching me in the darkness. The heavy silence that wasn't silence at all, but anticipation, hunger. I dream about what might have happened if I hadn't found that journal, if I'd shown up for my shift the next night, unaware that I was on the menu. And sometimes, when I pass a zoo and hear the distant roar of big cats, I wonder what they're really eating when the gates close and darkness falls. I wonder how many other Howards are out there, feeding their predators, keeping their secrets, because the most terrifying part wasn't discovering what Howard had done. It was realizing how long he'd been doing it before anyone noticed, how many people had seen the signs, the strange items in enclosures, the pattern of disappearances, and looked the other way. The animals were just being what they were born to be. The real monsters were the ones with keys to the cages. The creak of a rusted gate still haunts my dreams. That damp zoo smell of concrete and decay. I'm 19 now, working a dead-end barista job in a new state. My sketchbook untouched since that night at Brookside Zoo. Back then, I was a high school senior in suburban Ohio, chasing dumb bets with friends, thinking I was invincible. Sneaking into the zoo's closed exhibit was just a dare, a shot at rent money. But what I found there, those footprints, that cooler, changed me. Nobody believes me, not the cops, not my friends, but I know what I saw, and it's still following me. Brookside Zoo was a fading attraction, all peeling paint and sad monkeys, but it was our hangout, a place to sneak beers after dark. Senior year, my friends, Jake, Mia, and Tara, bet me $50 to break into the closed Big Cat exhibit, shut since 2012 for renovations. The sign was weathered, vines choking the fence, but fireball shots and pride pushed me through the gate, my phone's flashlight clicking on. The crunch of gravel under my sneakers was loud, the air thick with weeds and distant primate hoots. I laughed, texting Jake, not dead yet, but the path felt wrong, too quiet, until I saw footprints. Size 12 work boots, fresh in the mud, leading to the enclosure. My heart thudded, the rattle of a chain link fence sharp in the wind. I told myself it was maintenance, a late night worker, but the prints were deep, deliberate. The enclosure loomed, bars rusted, a metal door ajar. A groan echoed as I pushed it open, cold air hitting me, laced with ammonia and wet concrete. My flashlight swept the space. No dust, no cobwebs, the floor too clean, like someone scrubbed it daily. Chains hung from the walls, thick, not for cats, more like for something bigger. My gut screamed to leave, but my phone buzzed. Mia, you chickening out. I stayed, stupidly curious. A locker door squeaked in the corner, half hidden by a broken soda machine. A cooler sat beside it, padlocked, frost clinging to its edges despite the warm night. My hands shook, the clink of glass vials inside loud as I pried it open with a rock. The snap of the lock echoed, a gagging stench pouring out. Syringes, blood bags labeled, Bathing 19th, and photos, dozens, taped inside the lid. Kids from missing posters, Sarah Angrian, 16, gone since March. Others I didn't know. Faces marked with red X's. My breath caught. The hum of a generator nearby, too steady, too alive. A crackle broke the silence. A walkie-talkie spitting static outside. Boots stomped, heavy, close. A voice muttered, "Doors open." Keys jingling. I dove into a supply closet. The thud of my heart deafening. The ammonia smell choking me. Through a crack, two men in zoo uniforms dragged a tarp. One wearing size 12 boots, the other clutching bolt cutters. The tarp sagged. Heavy, and a hand slipped out. Pale. Teenage. A pink and green friendship bracelet dangling. Sarah Nguyen's, plastered on every news channel. My phone vibrated. A text from Jake, but I silenced it. My hands slick, the scrape of a shovel on concrete outside. One man growled, "Incinerator's gotta be cleaned after this." Hair clogs it. The roar of a furnace kicked on, heat seeping through the walls. My stomach lurched, the bracelet's colors burning in my mind. I waited, lungs burning, until their boots faded, then bolted, weaving through the zoo, past the otters, their splashes mocking me. I called 911 from the parking lot, gasping, but the cops found nothing. No cooler, no tarp, the incinerator routinely cleaned. The detective leaned back, skeptical. Kids love their ghost stories. That exhibit's empty. His pen clicked, case closed, but his eyes flicked to the exit, uneasy. I told Mia, my voice shaking, but she laughed. "You're tripping, Nate." Too much fireball. Jake and Tara stopped texting, their silence loud. I checked the news. Sarah's case was cold, no leads. But a week later, a package came. No sender. A zoo map. My apartment circled in red. And Sarah's bracelet. Its threads frayed, smelling of ash. My throat tightened. The caw of a crow outside too close. I moved. Changed my name. Ditched my sketch pad. But the footprints follow me, size 12 in my dreams. The clink of chains never far. The zoo staff weren't just workers. They were cleaners, disposing of kids. Trafficking victims, maybe. For profit or power, keeping Brookside's secrets locked in that cage. Their motive was cold, efficient, a machine that chewed up stragglers and spit out ash. Last night, my new apartment's window creaked, a Polaroid sliding under the door. Me at my coffee shop job, unaware, a red X over my face. The thud of boots echoed outside, faint circling. I burn every map, keep a crowbar by my bed. But every rattle of a fence, every whiff of ammonia feels like them. Their cooler still frosted. My name next on their list. The city's hum can't drown the creak of that gate. Those chains. I'm safe, they say, but the cage is out there. Its bars unseen. Its footprints closing in. I don't live near zoos anymore. I don't trust late-night vans or official explanations. If you ever see something that doesn't add up, don't record it. Don't watch. Just leave. Some cleanups are in system. It looks like your response was cut off. I'll complete the story while adhering to the guidelines, ensuring it stays within the 8,000 character limit, maintains the requested structure, and delivers a thrilling, creepy narrative with a shocking ending. The story will continue from where it left off, focusing on the zoo's after-hours cleanup and the narrator's escalating fear. Izu's entrance was a black void under the streetlights, the air thick with a sour chemical tang. My window blinds rattled as I peeked out, my coffee mug cold in my hands. The van's engine growled, low and steady, as the suited figures moved with mechanical precision, heaving a bundle that sagged unnaturally in the middle. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was just meat, maybe a dead giraffe, but my hands shook as I grabbed my phone to record. A faint thud echoed as a bundle hit the van's floor, followed by a muffled scrape, like something dragging inside the plastic. I zoomed in. my screen blurring. One figure's suit was stained, a dark smear glinting in the moonlight. My breath caught. The figure turned, their visor reflecting my apartment's light, and raised a gloved hand pointing directly at me. My pulse roared. I ducked, my phone slipping to the floor, the video still recording. The van's engine revved, tires crunching gravel as it sped off. Silence settled, heavy and raw. The next morning, I called the zoo again, asking about waste disposal. The PR guy, Carl, laughed too loudly, saying it was routine cleanup. Nothing to worry about. His voice cracked, and I heard papers rustling like he was nervous. I didn't buy it. That night, I stayed up, lights off, watching the entrance. At 2 a.m., the van returned, its headlights off. My heart pounded as I saw a new bundle, smaller this time, but with a shape that made my skin crawl. A curve like a shoulder, a head. A low moan drifted through my window, cut off by a sharp hiss, like a silenced scream. I started digging online, joining local forums. A user named Night Owl messaged me. Stop watching the zoo. People go missing around there. My throat tightened. I found news articles. Missing persons. Transients mostly. Last seen near the zoo. My mind raced, torn between reason and dread. I told my coworker, Jess, a single mom who loved true crime podcasts. She went pale, said her cousin, a delivery driver, had seen similar vans near the zoo, always at night, always with those suits. Don't poke around, she whispered, her hands twisting her apron. 2 nights later, I saw the van again, but this time a figure lingered by the gate, holding something small, a shoe, scuffed and tiny, like a child's. My blood ran cold. I snapped a photo, the flash betraying me with a brief glow. The figure's head snapped up, visor gleaming, and they sprinted toward my building. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp, the crash deafening. Footsteps thudded in the stairwell, heavy and fast. My hands shook as I locked my door, shoving a chair under the knob. The knocking came, slow and deliberate, rattling the frame. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You saw too much. My knees buckled. My knees buckled. I called 911, whispering my address, my voice barely audible over my pounding heart. The knocking stopped, but a faint scratch slithered across the door, like a blade testing the wood. I clutched a kitchen knife, my palms slick, until sirens wailed outside. The footsteps retreated, fading down the stairs. The cops searched the zoo's service area at dawn. They found plastic scraps, blood traces, and a hidden storage locker with medical tools. Scalpels, syringes, stained gloves. The zoo's night crew, led by Carl, claimed it was for animal autopsies, but their records were spotty, and several workers had priors for trafficking. The cops suspected a human trafficking ring, using the zoo as a cover, disposing of evidence in those vans. Carl vanished before they could question him. His office cleared out overnight. I moved across town, to a high-rise far from the zoo. I don't sleep much. Every engine rumble, every shadow, feels like those suits watching me. Last week, a package arrived, no sender. Just a child's shoe, identical to the one I'd seen, with a note inside, keep quiet. I burned it, but the chemical stench lingers in my nightmares. Carl's out there, and I know he's still cleaning up. The late afternoon sun slanted through the trees, casting long shadows across the empty pathways of Oak Ridge Zoo. Most visitors had left for the day, leaving behind that peculiar silence that settles over places designed for crowds. I loved this time, when the zoo belonged to the animals and the handful of us who cared for them. 6 months into my volunteer position, and this peaceful hour had become my favorite part of the week. I was finishing up at the meerkat habitat, noting their feeding behaviors for the research department, when the alarm blared through the speakers. The shrill, pulsing sound made me jump, sending my clipboard clattering to the ground. Attention all personnel. This is a Code Zero. Repeat, Code Zero. Escaped animal drill now in progress. All staff and volunteers proceed immediately to designated secure areas. This is not a drill? Wait. It's not a drill, but it's a drill? I frowned, retrieving my clipboard. The contradictory announcement was odd, but I figured someone had simply misspoken. I'd been through 2 of these drills before. Standard procedure. Get to the nearest secure building. Lock down. Wait for the all clear. Nothing complicated. I headed for the staff building, a squat concrete structure that housed offices, break rooms, and first aid stations. As I walked, I noticed something strange. The usual background chorus of animal sounds had vanished. No distant monkey calls, no lion roars, just eerie silence punctuated by the fading alarm. Near the reptile house, I spotted Dr. Winters, the head zoologist, hurrying toward the administrative building. Her face was pale, her normally composed expression replaced with something I'd never seen before, raw fear. She was speaking urgently into a radio. Containment breach in Sector 6. I need all available security personnel there now. Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. And keep the volunteers contained. No one leaves the secure areas until we handle this. My step faltered. Volunteers contained? This didn't sound like any drill I'd been part of before. I reached the staff building and found several other volunteers already inside, along with Marcus, one of the senior keepers. His usual easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by tight-lipped tension as he checked names off a clipboard. Everyone accounted for? Asked Sarah, another keeper, as she locked the door behind me. The metallic click of the deadbolt sliding home echoed in the suddenly quiet room. Still missing 2 volunteers and Hector for maintenance, Marcus replied, his voice deliberately calm. Too calm. What's going on? I asked. Is this really a drill? Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Just follow protocol, Sarah said, not meeting my eyes. Stay away from the windows. Through the narrow window beside the door, I could see security personnel jogging toward the back of the zoo. Not toward the animal enclosures, but toward the research building, a restricted area where volunteers weren't allowed. I'd only glimpsed it from the outside, a modern structure that seemed out of place among the more rustic zoo buildings. My phone buzzed with a text from Aiden, another volunteer who worked primarily with the big cats. You safe? It read. In the staff building. What's happening? I replied. His response sent a chill down my spine. Don't know. Something's wrong. Overheard Dr. Winters talking about a containment breach in the research wing. Never seen the security team this freaked out. The research wing? Not an animal enclosure? I moved closer to Marcus, who was now speaking quietly into his radio. Need to contain the situation before authorities arrive, he was saying, his back to the volunteers. If it reaches the residential areas, he sensed me behind him and turned sharply, cutting off mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed. You need something? He asked, voice tight. Just wondering when we might get the all clear, I said, trying to sound casual. When it's safe, he replied flatly. Go sit down. The minutes stretched into an hour. Outside, the sky darkened as dusk approached. I watched through the window as more security personnel arrived. Some wearing uniforms I didn't recognize. Not regular zoo staff. They carried what looked like specialized equipment. Not the tranquilizer guns used for animal escapes, but something more complex, more ominous. Whispers circulated among the volunteers. Someone had heard it was a tiger. Someone else said a venomous snake. But none of that explained the fear I'd seen on Dr. Winters' face or why security was converging on the research building. I needed to use the restroom, or at least, that's what I told Marcus. In reality, I wanted to get a better view of what was happening. The staff building's second-floor bathroom had a window overlooking the back of the zoo, including the research wing. Upstairs, I locked the bathroom door and moved to the window. From here, I could see the research building clearly. Floodlights illuminated the area, casting harsh white light over the scene. Security personnel had formed a perimeter around the building. Dr. Winter stood with a group of people in lab coats, gesturing urgently. Among them was a tall figure in a dark suit who didn't look like zoo staff at all. Movement caught my eye. A shadow darting between buildings, too fast to be a person running normally. The security team reacted instantly, lights swinging toward the movement, voices shouting commands I couldn't make out. For a split second, the lights illuminated something. A figure, roughly human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too fluid in its movements, its proportions slightly off. It disappeared into the shadows between buildings before I could process what I'd seen. My heart hammered against my ribs. Whatever that was, it wasn't an animal. At least not any animal that belonged in a zoo. I was so focused on the scene outside that I didn't hear the bathroom door open. I'd forgotten that staff had keys. Enjoying the view? I whirled around to find Dr. Winters standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Behind her stood the man in the dark suit. I began, but she cut me off. Curious, I understand, but curiosity can be dangerous. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her and the suited man. Especially when it involves things you don't understand. What escaped? I asked directly, because that wasn't an animal I saw out there. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise maybe, or concern. You saw it? The suited man asked, speaking for the first time. His voice was cool, clinical. Just for a second, I admitted. What is it? Dr. Winters sighed, suddenly looking exhausted. A mistake. An experiment that evolved beyond our expectations. You're experimenting on animals? I asked, appalled. Not exactly, the suited man said. Dr. Winters' team was researching ways to enhance cognitive communication between species, using quantum entanglement to bridge the gap between human and animal consciousness. My mind struggled to process this. I don't understand. We created a field, Dr. Winters explained, her voice low. A quantum field designed to enhance animal cognition to allow deeper communication. But the field, it attracted something else. Something that was already watching, already trying to understand us. From where? I whispered. We don't know, the suited man replied. Another dimension perhaps. Another reality adjacent to our own. It used our field as a doorway. A cold weight settled in my stomach. And now it's loose. Dr. Winters nodded grimly. It's been contained in the research facility for months, learning, adapting. Today it finally figured out how to escape physical containment. What does it want? I asked. To understand, to experience, to, she hesitated, to become more like us. It's been practicing. The way she said practicing made my skin crawl. A sudden commotion outside drew our attention back to the window. Shouts echoed across the zoo grounds. The floodlights swung wildly, converging on a spot near the tiger habitat. It's heading for the exit, the suited man said tersely. We need to move now. Dr. Winters turned to me. You'll stay here. When this is over, we'll discuss what you've seen and what it means. The threat was implicit in her tone. I wasn't meant to know any of this. I was a liability. They left, locking the door behind them. I pressed my face to the window again, watching as security personnel ran toward the tiger habitat. In the chaos, no one was watching the staff building. I needed to get out. Now. The bathroom window was small but not impossible to squeeze through. Beyond was a maintenance ladder leading to the ground. Heart pounding, I forced the window open and climbed out onto the narrow metal platform. The cool night air hit my face as I descended the ladder, trying to move quickly but quietly. Above me, I could hear the commotion continuing. Shouts, the crackle of radios, the thud of running feet. I reached the ground and pressed myself against the wall, trying to decide which way to run. The main exit would be guarded. The service entrance might be my best bet. A strange clicking sound froze me in place. A rhythmic noise, almost mechanical, but with an organic quality that raised the hair on my arms. It was coming from around the corner of the building. Slowly, fighting every instinct screaming at me to run, I peered around the edge. In the dim light cast by a distant security lamp, I saw it. The entity. Up close, its appearance was more disturbing than I could have imagined. It had a human-like form, but its proportions were subtly wrong. Limbs too long, joints bending in unnatural ways. Its surface seemed to shift and flow, never quite settling into a fixed appearance. Where a face should be was a suggestion of features. Indentations for eyes, a line for a mouth, but they moved, rearranged themselves as I watched. It was studying something on the ground with horror. I realized it was a zoo uniform, a maintenance worker's coveralls. As I watched, it picked up the fabric, turning it over with appendages that resembled fingers but moved like tentacles. Then, in a motion that defied physics, it seemed to absorb the uniform into itself. Its form shimmered, shifted, and began to take on the appearance of the clothing. Not wearing it, becoming it. I must have made a sound. A gasp, a whimper, because suddenly its attention snapped to me. The approximation of a head turned, and where eyes should be, deep voids fixed on mine. It moved toward me, not walking but flowing, covering ground with impossible speed. I broke from my paralysis and ran, blind with terror, away from the building and into the zoo grounds. Behind me, I heard that clicking sound again, closer now. I darted between exhibits, trying to lose it in the maze of pathways. My lungs burned, legs ached, but pure adrenaline kept me moving. I rounded a corner and collided with someone. Marcus, the senior keeper. He caught me by the shoulders, steadying me. "What are you?" he began. Then his eyes widened as he looked past me. "Oh God. Run." We ran together toward the service entrance, the closest exit. As we reached the gate, I glanced back and caught another glimpse of the entity. It had stopped pursuing us and stood perfectly still about 50 yards away. Its form had changed again. Now it looked more human, more complete. It was watching us with what might have been curiosity. Marcus fumbled with his keys, unlocking the service gate. "Get out," he urged me through. "Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone about this. Just go." "What about you?" I asked. "I have to go back. Help contain this. It's my job." His face was grim. "But you're a volunteer. You shouldn't be part of this. What is that thing?" I demanded. He shook his head. Something that should have stayed in theory. A consciousness without form, learning to exist in our reality. "Now go." I ran into the night, not stopping until I reached my car parked several blocks away. My hand shook so badly, I could barely get the key in the ignition. The next morning, local news reported that Oak Ridge Zoo was closed for emergency maintenance. No mention of an incident, no reports of injuries or missing persons. Just a brief statement about facility upgrades. I tried calling other volunteers. No one wanted to talk about what had happened. Some claimed it was just a drill. Others didn't return my calls at all. When I went to the police, they listened politely to my wild story about quantum experiments and entities from other dimensions. Then they called the zoo. Dr. Winters herself spoke to them, explaining that we'd had a routine escaped animal drill, and that I had apparently misunderstood the situation. She suggested that perhaps I had been working too hard, experiencing stress-induced hallucinations. They believed her, of course. Why wouldn't they? She was a respected scientist. I was just a volunteer with an unbelievable story. I never returned to Oak Ridge Zoo. I deleted my volunteer badge from my resume, tried to forget what I'd seen. But some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering those void-like eyes, that fluid movement, wondering if they ever truly contained it. Wondering if it's still out there, learning, practicing, becoming more human with each passing day. Sometimes, when I pass strangers whose movements seem just slightly off, whose expressions don't quite match their words, I find myself looking more closely, searching for signs. Because the most terrifying part isn't that something inhuman escaped that day. It's that I might not recognize it if I saw it again. I've never liked zoos much. The animals pacing endlessly in cramped spaces always made me feel uneasy. But when our city zoo announced it was closing permanently, something tugged at me to go on the final farewell tour. Nostalgia, maybe. Or curiosity. Either way, I wish I hadn't. It was a humid Saturday afternoon in late August, and the sky hung heavy and gray as I walked through the zoo gates. They were rusted and squeaked loudly as they swung shut behind me, like an old trap. The ticket attendant smiled broadly, too broadly, and handed me a colorful map printed on cheap paper. "Enjoy the final tour," she said cheerfully, her eyes unnervingly bright. I nodded, uneasy for reasons I couldn't quite place, and moved deeper inside. The zoo felt oddly quiet, deserted, Most animal enclosures were empty, signs of abandonment already setting in, peeling paint, cracked pathways, and weeds poking through concrete. Occasionally, small groups wandered by, whispering quietly, looking uneasy themselves. I wasn't the only one feeling the weird vibe. As I wandered toward the back of the zoo, I noticed employees clustered around service buildings, whispering urgently. When I approached, their conversations abruptly stopped, replaced by plastic smiles and overly enthusiastic greetings. "Thanks for visiting," one said, her voice strained beneath false cheerfulness. Something was definitely wrong. I walked on, glancing at the locked service buildings, noticing scratches around the handles, dried mud caked heavily by the doors, as if something large had recently been dragged inside. My stomach knotted uneasily. I rounded a corner and found myself near the old reptile house, shuttered, supposedly empty. Yet through dirty windows, I could see faint movement, shadows shifting quickly. A low scraping noise drifted from inside. I moved closer, curiosity drawing me forward, despite every instinct screaming otherwise. Through a gap between wooden slats, my heart froze. A dim light flickered, illuminating cages stacked haphazardly, cramped together. Something inside moved sluggishly, a large shape writhing. I caught a glimpse of scales, dull and dry. They said the reptiles had all been relocated weeks ago. Clearly, they lied. Footsteps sounded behind me, heavy boots crunching gravel. I turned quickly. One of the zoo workers, a man named Carl, according to his name tag, stood watching me, eyes cold beneath a friendly smile. "Sorry, sir. This area is closed off," he said firmly, stepping closer, his voice calm, controlled, threatening beneath the politeness. "I was just leaving," I muttered quickly, pulse quickening, brushing past him without another glance. But Carl's eyes lingered, burning into my back long after I had rounded another corner. My unease deepened as the afternoon faded into a hazy dusk. The zoo emptied slowly, families trickling out toward the gates, yet a strange feeling nagged at me, like I was being watched from somewhere just out of sight. The zoo staff stayed unusually cheerful, constantly ushering people along, making sure no one lingered too long in any one spot. I turned down a narrow path, away from the main crowd, intending to leave by a shortcut near the maintenance sheds. As I moved quietly down the path, a sudden loud crash echoed from behind a locked door labeled quarantine area. Staff only. I stopped, breath catching. Another crash, louder, frantic now, followed by muffled shouting. Someone inside was yelling, panic clear even through the thick metal door. Heart pounding, I pressed my ear against the door. Words came faintly, urgent and terrified. "Get it sedated quickly. Can't let it escape again." Something slammed violently against the door from inside, hard enough to rattle the frame. I jumped back, nearly falling, breath ragged with sudden fear. The door burst open suddenly. A frantic zookeeper staggering out, uniform torn, face pale and smeared with blood. "Run!" he gasped, grabbing my arm. "They're loose. They hint him." I caught a glimpse inside. Dim cages opened wide, locks shattered, something massive moving swiftly in the shadows, claws scraping violently across concrete floors. We ran, sprinting blindly toward the exit, footsteps pounding behind us, growls echoing terrifyingly loud. I glanced back once, immediately regretting it. An animal lunged toward us, massive and dark, eyes glinting viciously, teeth bared. Suddenly, Carl appeared ahead, blocking our path, his calm expression gone, replaced by panic and anger. "Where do you think you're going?" he shouted. He held a heavy tranquilizer gun in shaking hands, but aimed it not toward the animal, toward us. "Can't let anyone find out," he muttered darkly. Adrenaline surged through me, realizing with sick clarity the zoo's darkest secret. The animals hadn't been relocated. They'd been hidden, neglected, experimented on, or worse. The zoo wasn't closing because of funding. It was hiding years of twisted abuse, and now their secrets had finally broken loose. "Please," I begged, heart hammering. "Let us go." Carl hesitated for just a moment. It was enough. The zookeeper lunged, knocking Carl aside, the tranquilizer gun clattering away. The growling grew closer, shadows descending upon Carl's frantic screams as we bolted for the exit. Bursting through the rusted gates, we stumbled onto empty streets, gasping for breath. Sirens wailing distantly. Police swarmed moments later, blocking streets, sealing the zoo. The chaos unfolding behind the fences was contained quickly. Officers carrying tranquilizer rifles and nets. But nobody would talk. Everything quickly swept under bureaucratic secrecy. I left town soon after, haunted by what I'd seen. What the zoo had hidden beneath cheerful facades. Sleep became difficult. Nightmares of shadowy cages, clawed hands reaching through bars. Carl's desperate screams. No official story ever emerged. Just a quiet announcement that the zoo had closed permanently due to operational concerns. Years later, I still flinch at shadows, avoid crowded places. Zoos terrify me now. Their cage is a chilling reminder of hidden cruelty. But worst of all is knowing that evil often hides behind cheerful smiles, colorful brochures, and locked doors labeled staff only, because sometimes the most terrifying predators aren't the animals locked inside cages, but the people holding the keys. The blood on the concrete looked too neat, too organized. That was the first thing that bothered me about the whole animal attack story at Riverside Zoo. I'd been working in support there for 3 years, maintaining their security camera system, and I'd seen real animal incidents before. They're chaotic, messy, unpredictable. This looked staged. The official story was simple enough. Tourist named David Chen had somehow gotten too close to the tiger enclosure during feeding time. A malfunction in the safety barriers allowed one of the Siberian tigers to escape and maul him before keepers could intervene. Tragic accident. Tragic accident. Very sorry. So close for safety review. But I'd been in the security office when the first calls came in. I heard the panic in the radio chatter, saw the faces of the keepers rushing past the windows. Their fear wasn't about an escaped tiger, it was about something else entirely. The next morning, Director Walsh called me in early to review the camera footage for the insurance investigation. Standard procedure, he said. Just need to document the timeline of events. He stood behind me as I pulled up the feeds from around the tiger habitat, his breathing shallow and quick. Start at 2:15 p.m., he instructed. Right before the incident, I loaded the timestamp and started the playback. The footage showed tourists moving normally around the habitat viewing area. David Chen was there, alone taking photos with an expensive camera. Nothing unusual. Then I noticed something odd. At 2:17 p.m., 2 men in zoo maintenance uniforms approached Chen. The camera angle made it hard to see their faces clearly, but their body language was wrong. Too purposeful. Too coordinated. Can you enhance that section? Walsh asked, his voice tight. I zoomed in, adjusting the contrast. What I saw made my stomach drop. The maintenance workers weren't talking to Chen. They were restraining him. One grabbed his arm while the other moved behind him. Chen's mouth was open, probably shouting, but the cameras didn't record audio. Technical difficulties with that feed, Walsh said quickly. Skip ahead to 2:20. But I'd already seen what happened next. The 2 men dragged Chen away from the viewing area, not toward the tiger enclosure, but toward a service tunnel entrance marked authorized personnel only. Chen struggled, dropping his camera, but they were too strong. Mr. Walsh, I said slowly, this doesn't show an animal attack. This shows equipment malfunction. He cut me off sharply. The timestamp is corrupted. Skip to the emergency response footage. I looked at him, seeing sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. What really happened to David Chen? Walsh's hand moved to his radio. Security to at office. Need an escort. My blood turned cold. I quickly copied the footage to a thumb drive while his attention was on the radio, palming it just as 2 security guards entered. Jake's feeling unwell, Walsh announced. Please escort him to his car. He'll be taking some time off. The guards flanked me as I stood. One was Rodriguez, who I'd known for 2 years. His usual friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by something harder. Just cooperating with the investigation. Rodriguez said quietly as we walked. Nothing complicated, but his grip on my arm was firm, and I noticed the other guard's hand resting on his taser. This wasn't about my health. They walked me to my car in the employee lot, watching as I got in. "Take a few days," Rodriguez said through my window. "Let things settle down." I drove home, thumb drive burning in my pocket. That evening, I watched the footage again on my personal computer. The timestamp was clear. Undamaged, David Chen had been abducted by zoo employees and dragged into a service tunnel. 15 minutes later, the escaped tiger alarm sounded. 20 minutes after that, his mauled body was discovered near the habitat, but Chen had never been near the tigers. I researched David Chen online. He wasn't just a tourist. He was an investigative journalist from San Francisco, working on a series about animal trafficking and illegal exotic animal trade. His last published article had mentioned following leads to several West Coast zoos. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Chen had been investigating something at Riverside Zoo. Someone had silenced him and made it look like an accident. I tried calling the police, but when I mentioned Riverside Zoo, I was transferred to Detective Morrison, who, it turned out, was Director Walsh's brother-in-law. The investigation was closed, he said. Tragic animal attack. Case solved. 3 days later, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was stolen, but my computer was destroyed. The thumb drive was gone from where I'd hidden it. A note was left on my kitchen table. Technical difficulties resolved. Stay healthy. I quit my job at the zoo the next week. Started working it for a small business across town, but I couldn't let it go. David Chen deserved justice. I started digging deeper, using databases I probably shouldn't have accessed. What I found was a pattern. 3 other accidents at Riverside Zoo over the past 5 years. A wildlife photographer who fell into the alligator habitat. A veterinarian who was gored by a rhino. A federal inspector who suffered a snake bite during a routine visit. All were investigating the zoo for various violations. All died in ways that eliminated their research. I compiled everything I could find and sent it anonymously to the FBI and several news outlets. Within a week, federal agents raided Riverside Zoo. They found what David Chen had been investigating: a sophisticated animal trafficking operation using the zoo as a front. Rare species were being smuggled in and out through those service tunnels. Millions of dollars in illegal trade. Director Walsh and 6 employees were arrested. Rodriguez wasn't among them. Apparently, he'd been cooperating with Chen's investigation, which explained his discomfort that day. But they never found David Chen's camera, the one with whatever photos he'd taken before they killed him. Sometimes I wonder what evidence died with him in that tunnel. The zoo closed permanently after the trials. The property sits empty now, overgrown and abandoned. But sometimes, driving past at night, I see lights in the service tunnels. Maybe security guards. Maybe urban explorers. Or maybe there are still secrets buried there that someone wants to keep hidden. Because the most terrifying part isn't that they killed David Chen. It's how easily they covered it up. How many people looked the other way. How a simple animal attack explanation satisfied everyone who should have asked harder questions. I still work in it, but I'm more careful now about what I see and what I know. Because I learned that some truths are dangerous to witness. Some investigations end with the investigator becoming another accident statistic, and some predators walk on 2 legs. The last echoes of the wild fade, leaving behind a disquieting silence. 7 glimpses into the unsettling reality that can fester within the confines of a zoo. Did a particular enclosure send a shiver of primal fear down your spine? The true horror, perhaps, is when the curated experience unravels to reveal something raw, something deeply wrong. Which tale's unsettling truth will stalk your thoughts tonight? Confess your deepest zoo anxieties in the comments. The night shift is always listening. And if these untamed horrors have captured your attention, subscribe to Nightmare True Horror and like this video to illuminate the path for other seekers of the genuinely terrifying. Until the next feeding time, beware what watches you from the shadows.